Today, we're going to break down something pretty fascinating: how a pretty candid interview with actor Kelsey Grammer got spun into this viral call to arms online. We're going to look at what Grammer actually said, and then see how a really popular commentary video took his words and built this much bigger story around them. So, right off the bat, the commentator, a guy named OK Rick, frames this as a huge deal. He doesn't just play the interview. He calls it one of the most powerful videos he's seen from a celebrity in ages. Like it's some kind of major expose. That framing really sets the stage and raises the stakes for anyone watching. All right, let's get into the first big idea. The whole foundation of this commentary video rests on this one really provocative claim: that Kelsey Grammer is a guy who's been basically blacklisted, pushed out, and silenced by the Hollywood machine. And the host is not subtle about it at all. He uses these really loaded words, right? Blacklisted, shut out. He's painting this very clear picture of an entire industry actively punishing Grammer just because his conservative views don't fit their narrative. So, to make his case, the host brings up three key points. First, an incident where the BBC supposedly cut an interview short. Second, he suggests Grammer's career kind of stalled out on purpose after some big roles. And finally, he makes the sweeping claim that this is all part of a bigger plan to, in his words, destroy conservatives in Hollywood. Okay, so we've heard the commentator's argument. Now, let's peel that back a layer and look at the actual source material. What did Kelsey Grammer himself really say in those interview clips that were used? Well, when it comes to his politics, Grammer is very direct. He gives his full-throated support for the former president, calling his performance wonderful and transparent. And you can imagine this is the statement that really becomes a lightning rod. And Grammer even talks about the fallout from those views. He comes right out and says, yeah, my political stance has probably cost me some jobs. So he's confirming, in his own words, that there have been real professional consequences. Then he gets into the social impact, and he uses this really powerful phrase, saying he was relegated to the fringes. It suggests he was sort of exiled, and the example he gives is simple but says a lot. He just stopped getting invited to the parties. But here's where Grammer makes a big pivot. He moves from talking about his own career to his personal philosophy, which he grounds in his faith. He talks about unity and love thy enemy. Now this idea becomes super important because it's going to clash directly with the commentator's final takeaway. Now we get to section 3, and this is where things take a turn. We're going to see how the host takes what Grammer said and weaves it into a much darker story. This is where simple interpretation starts to become a full-blown narrative. This is a key moment. Grammer offhandedly mentions not wanting to be part of what he calls the dungeon crowd. It's a pretty vague term, right? But the commentator grabs onto it and claims it's a direct reference to some kind of secret, depraved, and sinister stuff happening behind the scenes in Hollywood. And then the host just runs with that idea of parties. He starts pulling in allegations from other people like Nicki Minaj and claims these parties involve satanic cult rituals and even blood sacrifice. Let's be really clear here. Grammer said he wasn't invited to parties. The host alleges those parties involve absolute depravity and evil. A huge leap. So all of this builds to the video's climax. This is where the host isn't just interpreting anymore. He's now directly challenging and rejecting Kelsey Grammer's core message. And you can see the clash right here, side by side. You've got Grammer saying things like, my fellow American is not my enemy. And on the other side, you have the host flat out saying, I don't know if I can agree with that, and concluding that common ground is impossible now. It's a total rejection of Grammer's philosophy. So after building this whole narrative, this story of conspiracy and deep division, what's the point? What is this commentary video actually trying to get people to do? Well, the host tells us exactly what the goal is. The video ends with a very specific call to action. The host asks viewers to share it, not just as an interesting interview, but as a tool to wake people up to what he calls absolute depravity and evil. This turns the simple act of watching and sharing into, well, taking a side in a culture war. And that's really the big question we're left with. We started with an actor's personal thoughts on his career, his politics, and his faith. But by the time it gets filtered through online commentary, it's become evidence in a larger battle. So how does this whole process of reframing and sharing completely change the meaning of what someone originally said?